Welcome to the Art of Procurement, the official podcast of the Catalyst Co-community. And our purpose is to enhance the impact of procurement by elevating the discussion one conversation at a time. Here at Art of Procurement, Catalysts come together every single week to share their challenges, ideas, successes, and perspectives on the business of procurement. Hi there everybody, I'm Philip Eidson and I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And before I begin, I just want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. So on September the 11th and the 12th, Kelly Barner of Buyers Meeting Point and I will be hosting a series of live workshops. They're titled Creating Your Procurement Catalyst Plan for Action. And as we've talked about on the show before, we define a procurement catalyst as an agent that provokes or accelerates significant changes or actions. But being a successful catalyst calls for the amplification of both technical skills and what we've termed, or what we've really taken from Seth Godin, who terms them real skills. Some of those skills are familiar to procurement professionals and others are rising in importance as procurement's role expands. But how can we find the time to develop and expand our skills against a backdrop of time pressures, competing priorities, and the reality that the most valuable capabilities are best honed on the job and not in the classroom? So the workshop is for procurement professionals of all levels who want to take charge of their own development and who aren't afraid to try something new. What we've done is we've scheduled 3 different sessions just to make sure that almost wherever you are in the world, there's a workshop at a reasonable hour for you. So if that sounds like something of interest, you can check out more. You can go and save your seat at the workshop just by going to artofprocurement.com/action plan. That's artofprocurement.com/action plan. So on to today's show. I've been really looking forward to sharing today's interview with you for some time. I'm joined on the show by Oliver Gall. Oliver is the head of sourcing at S&P Global. I was introduced to Oliver by my friends at Procurement, and in fact we'll both be speaking at the upcoming Procurement Indirect West Conference in Phoenix, which is later this month, so September 2018. In our conversation, we focused on the future of the procurement operating model. What is this likely to look like? How can we all adapt to thrive in this new environment? And what are some of the unknowns that we don't have answers for, but that we actually need to keep a close eye out for? We also talked about our own development and that of our teams. Oliver provides some really great advice on how to manage the panic that often sets in when faced with change or faced with new challenges. I left the conversation inspired both by the opportunities available to us and the power of our own individual choices in taking advantage of those opportunities. And so I started by asking Oliver if he chose procurement or did procurement choose him.
Fresh out of college, I joined a bank in England on a graduate scheme, and part of that was rotating around different parts of the organisation. But also being as part of the graduate scheme, you got exposed to other things going on. One of those other things going on was like an executive customer site visit to an Indian outsourcer that we had. And one reason or another, I got the opportunity to be essentially an executive assistant on that trip to go to India. At that point, I pretty much had no idea what procurement was. I didn't really know much about Indian outsourcing, but the thought and opportunity to get exposed to it and just go to a different country was great. So we went there, we worked for 2 weeks, fascinated by both the industry, the people I work with, and the country. I thought it was great. Yeah. So I organised my next rotation to be within the procurement department, and then never left. I got the next job within there, and then that's the start of it.
It's funny that kind of mirrors what I did with in terms of rotation scheme. I went into procurement and was supposed to rotate through a bunch of other businesses, and then just liked it so much I ended up staying. And who knows what would have happened if I'd have gone and completed the rotation, but there was just something about it that made me want to stay.
Well, yeah. when people are like, was it your dream job? Like, no.
No, yeah, I had no clue.
Really nice to go to India, to be honest. And then you're like, wow, this is interesting. I wouldn't mind doing this for a bit longer.
It's actually funny because that's what was with me. I was traveling all over the place, and I'm thinking, how can I wouldn't otherwise get the chance to do all this travel to all these great places. Procurement seems like a great vehicle for me to see the world, so and to have somebody else pay for it. So I'm going to stick with it.
Okay. I didn't want to be like 24 years old, like great, you have not great enough money, and then the opportunity to fly business class and stay in these hotels with.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and then it definitely came, but then realizing what it could do, I guess, it was a process rather than it was a magical dawning light of all the sort of areas that it touches and the potential that it has. But that was the initial ignition into the career.
So what does your current role then entail as we fast forward a few years?
Yeah,
just a few years.
Gone by, but, so I'm now head of global sourcing and procurement services for a Fortune 500 company. And the role really spans the gamut of a procurement organization, everything from working with very experienced category managers who I trust with managing multi-million dollar categories and extracting value from that, through to then underpinning them with support services and all the procurement operations and all the technology that goes into everything from identifying spend through to making decisions on RFPs through to then executing purchase orders and lastly then the payment.
And so within
across,
that, I'm sorry, Oliver.
So it's across about 20 odd countries globally.
You answered my next question. I was going to ask you whether that was with global responsibility. So it's a fair remit that you have there. As before we actually go into the topics I want to talk about today, I had a question about, just from a career perspective, when you look back so far, what would you say is a big lesson learned in your career? Maybe something that keeps coming up time and time again, or something that perhaps didn't go as well as you wanted it to, that you took something away from that you've then applied into future roles?
So as a career advice, and what I give to all of my team when they are promoted, is that panic that you feel in your stomach when you get a new job. And that feeling of, I don't really know what I'm doing here, that's entirely natural. That's normal. And often the person that has promoted you or has recruited you has seen the things in you that potentially you're not even aware of yet. And having confidence in the things you've previously done, so whether it's the ability to understand problems or the ability to communicate ideas, just trust them, and all the other details and the scale and the magnitude of what you are now faced with, that you'll overcome that, and you'll look back and then you get promoted to another job, and then that panic and
the
feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, will get it. It's a cyclical thing, and the panic and magnitude of what you're applying to get bigger. But trust me, each step in my career that has been there, but I look back and each step, it's just a part of the process to getting comfortable at what you're doing.
Now, do you think if that panic doesn't exist, that you're not pushing yourself enough, that you're not growing or looking to roles that you could grow into? Because I feel that panic is what's one of the keys to development, because that's how a lot of learning comes about, is by basically feeling more comfortable so the panic goes away.
It's something that I sit down with my team and explain around development. I don't use a panic that would actually break the model, but it's three concentric circles which really neatly encapsulates what individual and personal progress is about, with the central one being comfort zone. And comfort zone is, hey, I know how to do this, standing on my head, I have to think about it every single second. That's great. You don't have to worry about it. It means that you're never ever going to grow. Then on the outside, so skipping the middle circle, is panic. That is, I literally am out of my depth, sweat's coming down, heart is palpitating, I feel I'm about to be sick, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And that's not a place you want to be in then, because you are so restricted by fear, you can't operate on. But the middle ground of that is what is considered a stretch. And that is geez, this is pretty uncomfortable, and there's obviously different degrees of that. It's uncomfortable, but I think I know enough to give it a shot, and then you get better at it, and you keep flying. Eventually, that stretch becomes the comfort zone.
Yeah.
The things which initially you're like, oh, gee, this is giving me a few sleepless nights. That becomes, this is easy for me. And then your comfort zone expands. And the lifelong goal of personal and individual growth is to identify when you are just sat and residing within your comfort zone and where you want to expand, identify things that are in stretch and work at them until they become comfort zone. And essentially over time, that comfort zone becomes broader and broader and broader. And I apply that same principle to challenging my team in terms of their responsibility and their training.
So as a leader, how are you able to create a safe space? Because I think that's really important. When you have that you have the panic, you feel that perhaps you're out of your depth. Confidence is so important, and that comes from essentially your leadership, creating a space that you're comfortable operating in and growing in. I just wonder if there's anything specific that you do to try and help your team actually feel more comfortable in developing, given the fact that they're in a situation they may feel uncomfortable about.
Yeah. So first of all, everybody's stretch and panic zone is different. So you need to have an open dialogue with your team about where they think they might want to go to next. But once that's established, you as a leader, I as a leader, need to reinforce that mistakes are an entirely natural part of learning and part of progress, and they're entirely inevitable. And I often use examples of where I'm making mistakes on a daily basis. But progress isn't not making mistakes, it's understanding and learning and developing from them. But also they're not just having the words said, it's then living the actions, that when they do make mistakes, because they will, because this is not a comfort zone, it's their panic that you support them and you stand up for them, and they get that confidence that actually they're not there on their own. They're not going to get shouted at or castigated for doing something wrong, that they have the opportunity to learn. And to do that, you have to be able to do it knowing that, hey, if this doesn't quite go the way I was expecting, then my boss has my back rather than jumping on it.
Yeah. So as we think about the main topic of conversation today, I'd just love for you to share with listeners 3 things that you would like them to take away from our chat.
Yeah, sure. So number one would be that we in the procurement industry stand at the precipice. It was a grandiose statement, but sort of precipice of a new dawn as to where and how procurement can add value. Mm-hmm. The impact of technology and the maturity of the function is presenting new ways that I never thought possible when I first started out in this career. Yeah. And so the second point being that with that grandiose statement about the future of procurement, that comes with both opportunity and risk. Yeah. I don't think you can have one without the other. And the third, to finish in the most optimistic manner, is everyone listening to this has a significant amount of control over both of those if they actively manage the situation.
So as I think about the first question, and the opportunities that you talked about in terms of procurement and a new value proposition, how do you think about that in terms of how we therefore need to change, or do we need to change how we operate, how we function, what our operating model looks like?
Yes, sure. So when I started out in 2004, and up to very recently, there's been obviously some iterative progress, but it's been focused upon the same objective, which is process excellence. So the 7-step sorting process, 5 steps forward, how many steps you want to put it, doesn't matter. Effectively, in the old world of procurement, wanted to achieve the same thing, which is define each step as much as you possibly can, equip that steps with all the best templates, tools, instructions, procedures, ensure that everyone can recite to you every single thing that needs to happen, put controls in place, and then manage performance based upon generally spend under management and savings. I think if you look at any procurement organization across the world over the next, so between sort of past 10, 15 years, every single company, including mature procurement organizations, were focused upon that. And I would look at the CPO, and their responsibility really was focused upon weeding out inefficiencies in process and maximising savings. And it's not to say that the new world does not need either of those, process efficiency and savings spend under management, as fundamental. It still does. But what has changed and what makes this an evolution is the integration of new technology. Mm-hmm. That we have reached a tipping point, both in technological capabilities with AI, RPA, so robotics process automation, and machine learning and natural language processing and optical character recognition and all those elements at tipping point, both in the technical capabilities, but also a critical mass, and that was the missing element, a critical mass of people looking at the procurement space, the evolution of products, services, platforms, to do the processes far better than we've ever been capable as human beings is now there. And whilst there are elements, particularly within the indirect space, where there are questions that need to be answered, it is enough people who are looking at solving those answers that I think it's a matter of time, of when rather than if those questions do get answered. So how do we structure an RFP for a unstructured category or an undefined need? Some of the questions which need to be there, but they are questions being looked at. And so it then raises a question: if, as procurement professionals, what we previously did was process excellence, known as seven-step process, or seven-step process and all the procedures and controls is now being majority performed by technology and performed by technology in a more efficient manner than previously. Where do we add value? And that is where the need for a new operating model comes in. Because the value comes in really the data. The data associated with everything with third-party providers give to an organization, whether that's data related to spend, whether it's data related to risk, whether it's data related to service performance, whether it's opportunities for innovation, the ability to conceive of all of that data and see it as a single data set. Technology now presents to us, and our ability to articulate that to our customers in a manner that they understand, and then to work through opportunities with them, for me, is the direction procurement is going in.
From a tactical perspective, you talked a lot about the automation as much as possible, frankly, as much of the tactical, transactional, but honestly, I think a lot of the strategic work that we do there's certainly a much greater role of technology. It's something that I feel we've talked about in procurement for a few years now. I mean, do you see that being the here and the now, or is that still a little bit of a vision that the technology perhaps doesn't exist to make come true?
So I'll answer it in two different ways. So when I look at just take an RFP process and the steps involved with that, the technology exists now to automate a heck of a lot of it. I think where the grey area exists is where some of the art comes into sort of the art science balance of the procurement professional. So whether it's the ability to distill sort of unstructured objectives into sort of solid, this is what we're trying to do, or whether it's the negotiations. Technology is, unless it is three bids and a buy, I don't think technology is that point. You're going to have nuanced negotiation. But a lot of the elements of the process, the technology is it. Obviously, it can be fine-tuned, but again, it comes back to a critical mass of companies and are fighting with each other to get their product seen above their competitors. That's going to drive improvements and innovations in that space. I think it is only a matter of time until the RFP process becomes, and I know it's happening certainly within the direct space, but also within the indirect space, highly, highly automated. Everything from taking the objectives to identifying and soliciting the vendors, distributing and writing RFPs, to bringing in responses, to them proposing to a sourcing professional, hey, look at this for negotiation. through to then even inputting into potential contracts or statements of work. That's all definable as a process. The technology in some of those areas is not mature there.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's a matter of when rather than if. My thoughts, and it will come back to what is the operating model of the future, because it comes back to 12 months ago. I thought that technology would be, hey, let's automate everything in the process, and then we just sit there and use our brains and think about other stuff. And as a general rule, that is kind of where we are today. But some of the technology I'm now being made aware of is the application of artificial intelligence to start to evaluate some of the same things that we're looking at. And so if I were to give a really complex spend cube to a senior category manager, they're going to look at it and go, okay, these are the levers that I look to normally pull in this scenario, and let me identify potential opportunities and then grade and prioritize that and say, okay, here's the 50 things that I'll look at. Of those 50, these are the top 5 for me, which really deserve my immediate attention. For me, that's 12 months ago. That's what I thought we should be doing. And now today, not to say that I'm convinced that the technology is usable today, but the conversation is being had around doing that, applying learned insights from category managers, applying the principles that they apply to the scenario to then conclude something or to propose a set of actions is something they're looking to overlay, cleaned and categorize and enrich data.
So you mentioned about data being a driver of what the future value proposition is, as you figure out what we can do and how we can evolve, how we create value for our organizations. I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about that link and, what kind of data that you're looking for, and also how does that then tie into the value prop that you believe that procurement can have in your organization?
Sure. I'll actually start the other way around because it drives the risk looking at the data to begin with. If you speak to any, 10, 15 years ago, this would have been what 100% true, but I bet it's still pretty true today, which is, if you spoke to any procurement professional, I said, what are your ways of measuring success? They're going to say 2 things. They're going to say spend under management. They're going to say how much we save. Some of the more mature ones might break out savings into cost avoidance or actually bottom line impacting saving. But really, they're going to fit within those 2 categories. And the biggest issue that any procurement function has served in terms of their value proposition is being able to have the business align the business's perception of procurement's value with procurement's perception of their own value. Because often the 2 things are not aligned. It may be because some of the savings are mystical and they're more focused around cost avoidance and never impact the bottom line. Or it may simply be that cost savings was not the primary driver of the business in the first place. It's nice to have, but ultimately it might have been innovation or time to market or agility or multiple other factors. The reason that we've not really tackled or successfully overcome the business challenge of add value to me is twofold. One, it's really easy to communicate to your CFO, your CEO, savings and cost synergy. They're really easy things to measure. Secondly, the ability to align what we do and be able to correlate it to value, to what the business needs, is hard. And it's not a simple answer. It is niche to the organization, it's niche to the category you look at, it's niche to the subcategory you're looking at. And even if you get to that point, the ability to articulate a coherent argument to the CFO why you prioritized a non-commercial objective over a dollar saving needs to be pretty strong. And I just don't think that whilst people may talk of their aspirations to align their own procurement function objectives with business objectives, that we have the competency or the technology to do that. And by the technology, it's okay if the business says, I want you to help me with my management of risk and compare that as a opportunity cost against negotiation or opportunity cost against working with multiple other suppliers. go and help me, you don't have the facilities and all the data that's required to be able to say, yeah, hang on, let me go run a report. It's going to take me about 4 months altogether and come back to you with an idea. Because often the opportunity is gone. But what we're now seeing now, so I just want to answer the second question first. The reason why we can now look at changing how we add value is that we have a foundations of solid integrated, and that's the key word, integrated data that is cleaned, classified, enriched, analyzed, and reported through automated machine learning platforms at a touch of a button. And so rather than me looking at just, I don't know, let me just take spend and look at spend and just see who are the big suppliers, where are the big areas, beat that number down as a way of assessing value. I can now take 14, 15 different areas of third-party related spend, of which 12 might be nothing to do with commercials, and say, okay, what is it telling me about my suppliers? And then sit down there with insight with my stakeholders and say, hey, did you know this about it? And it may be a non-commercial. It may be, hey, this supplier to this area is an opportunity because we're growing in parallel with them to partner on this, which are insights that we simply did not have with the technology available to us previously. The challenge being with that is that you have to then change perceptions of the CFO and the CEO who are more accustomed to procurement simply being the big burly individuals who beat a supplier up and get some dollar savings at the end.
Yeah, I feel like we've created a rod for our own back somewhat in using that as our metric because, as you said, it was easy and it was a way to justify the investment, in the growth of our profession, really. But there's an irony to me in at least in my experience, most of the CFOs and CEOs that I've worked with have never trusted my savings numbers anyway. You can go, and I've had instances where we've done it on invoice, like line level details on invoicing, which takes an army to pull together. And in those instances, yes, there is a lot more trust in the numbers because there's actually an audit trail for them. But 99% of the time, it's forecasts and assumptions, and they just say, well, I don't see these numbers being on the bottom line. So we're using a metric because it's easy because we think that's what people want to see. And yet they don't really trust it in the first place.
I challenge this to anyone listening to this, and particularly the people who use savings as the main metric for their success. Is if the CFO said, okay, do you trust this number? Fine, I'm slashing that department's budget by exactly the amount that you've saved. Do you have confidence that other projects, that other intended spend wouldn't be impacted as a result? I think the answer to that is probably no across the board,
right.
Which then raises the question, where is the value? It is a tool for marketing and an indication of performance, but it's certainly not an absolute, and it's certainly not necessarily correlated to what benefits the business most.
So I want to move on to the second point that you kind of made at the beginning was there's an opportunity and also a risk in terms of this change in value prop. When we look at that at the impact on individuals, how do you see that a team, a procurement group is going to be made up of in the future?
And this is something that I am aware more of the issue than I am the solution. Mm-hmm. But getting to the solution is certainly one of my priorities, and it should certainly be the priority of any diligent procurement leader out there, which is how do you equip your team for success and security in the future? And the answer to that 10 years ago would have been teaching the process. You get them more skilled at understanding the details of it, and how you apply that in different situations, and they get really good, and they could write an essay up on the perfect RFP, and these are the 57 elements of the contract, and that was how you equip them. You make their library of knowledge around the process and procedures so vast that they grow in terms of their importance in different areas. Now, with a lot of that being replaced, it's not today, but I think it is not just hyperbole or to state that it's going to be at some point in the future. the knowledge of process and details around procedures is not essential to a procurement individual. It's okay, what skill set do they need? And the answer is a lot broader. And the reason we're caveating that I know the issue, which is what I just laid out, which is the skill set of today is not necessarily the skill set of tomorrow. The solution is undefined, because the future, almost year in, year out, a perception of what procurement can become changes because of what the technology being presented to me exceeds my expectations. And so where I thought, hey, the ability to sit there and analyze large data sets, that's going to be something that's always in the remit of procurement. I think now that the amount of time before it is being proposed for insight. So it makes me feel that within the procurement industry, the science part of the skill set is moving more towards really strong data analytics competency, not necessarily the ability to be a quant and sit there and to be able to knock out complex algorithms, but the ability to be comfortable understanding the processes that goes into big data and how to then apply that in current situations. For me, that's a technical skill, which is completely different to whatever procurement people did. The next is then the softer skills, and I think this is where procurement people really be focusing a lot of their attention is then how do I take that data and understand value, and that's going to be the stakeholder management, your communication skills, your ability to articulate difficult concepts into sort of fairly intelligible sound bites that can progress ideas. The ability to be comfortable in an undefined and unclear world. It is probably the number one message I give to my team, that I don't know what the world has in store. But what I do know is it won't be what is today. And so we have to be comfortable in that degree of uncertainty. And when I sort of started the discussion, it was that it is, I'm going to steal one of your questions, but is when I think that, yeah, these are risks, that without doubt, where somebody's role is focused entirely upon process, that in all likelihood, there is somebody in the valley or somewhere else looking at how that can be automated or made more efficient through technology. It's not procurement. In fact, I think procurement is pretty late to the game. I think it's no exaggeration to say that we are in the midst of the next industrial revolution. And in the same way that steam came in and automated all machinery and changed the manufacturing textile world, the same is happening to these tertiary industries that we exist within. And so I think whilst it's not something that people want to hear, just fit into the answer in the third statement I made at the start, it is the reality. But the optimistic end to that is if the approach you take is this is reality, and you still have plenty of time to address it, but knowing that, hey, these are the skill sets that are going to be required in the procurement model of the future, then you have time to equip yourself with them. For me, that is around, okay, if I'm not strong in presentation skills, I'm not strong in communication, if I feel that my understanding around big data or the ability to distill that into ideas or how to go about innovation discussions, that's an area of weakness, then you have the opportunity yourself to say, hey, let me put myself on a course or buy a book or listen to a podcast. So those are the skill sets which we can work on ourselves and equip us best in what's going to be an uncertain future.
Yeah, I feel that, so I couldn't agree more. You know, I like to tell people to think about the future as just being people to people. You know, anything that you can do in your skill set, which helps you engage and influence other people in a stronger way, a more effective way. Those are the skills that you're going to need. I'm sorry, even if I don't know how they may necessarily be applied. Those are skills that we can't take away, that won't be taken away from you when we have all these other impacts from technology. And if you're in a process role, it's never been as important now to kind of take that as a call to action.
100%.
So as we start thinking about what that future procurement organization looks like, the different skill sets it entails, the impact of the technology, do you think that means that will ultimately be a smaller function, a smaller function that's perhaps, incrementally more impactful, but it just doesn't need as many people to be successful as what we need today?
Well, yes, but smaller is relative, right? Depends how big you start.
That's a good point.
I get the essence of the question, which is, look, procurement organizations today are made up of people who are doing process-focused roles. Then some junior people who might be supporting on a particular area, and then some less junior people who might be running a smaller project, and then progressively higher until you get the senior people who are doing the really big projects. And it's almost that triangle diagram that most organizations could fit themselves into, which is at the top, you just have the few people doing the really senior stuff. At the bottom, you have a lot of people doing the more process or junior role. The expectation, as I said, this is not unique to procurement, but talking specifically about our industry, is that that's going to turn on its head, which is the process-focused roles, as we've seen it in many other areas, will, or to some degree, be automated. The ability to automate relatively sort of junior thinking, which often is tied back to logic, really, rather than, hey, somebody just got instincts and they're flying from the hip about what to do next, which is a bit more harder to find. But the junior is much more applying, okay, what's the rationale steps that I go through? Again, that is, I'm not saying the whole gamut, but certainly areas of that will be addressed by technology. So the majority of the procurement function are going to be more senior individuals, of which their interpersonal and category or business skills are more important than their procurement knowledge. And the challenge that gets is the way that the old way of structuring, and I think probably the way that most organizations still structure their procurement function, which is lots of people at the bottom, a few more people at the top, and then decreasing as people, is you have a clear line of sight of talent.
Yeah.
You can develop, you can train, you can hunt, and eventually the stronger ones get promoted, and you end up with the people through 10, 15 years becoming who start at the bottom. At the top of that is perfectly simple, eloquent model, and has worked for years. When you flip that on its head, the question comes, how on earth do we get these people who today have 15, 20 years experience, but get people straight out of college to do that? And again, it comes into a case of more, I know the issue without really knowing 100% the solution, but part of it is in recruiting people for those roles, the necessity to be an expert on the process becomes less and less and less. The knowledge around a category and the implications for a business become of more value, because I can teach you a process. I can teach you 7 steps. And to be honest, you don't even need to know the 7-step process. The machine does it for you. You don't need to know where to look in terms of levers, because the machine tells you, hey, look at these 8 areas and go talk to your stakeholders about it. So then it becomes in, can you communicate opportunity? Can you understand where the business is coming from? And can you work with them in a manner to be effective? And I think the number one issue that you hear from the business is they don't understand what I'm trying to do here, or they don't understand the way that we work. They don't understand this X, Y, and Z reason around the business. They never come to me and say, he really does not know his 7-step process. They never say that. And so to have somebody who does understand it, that can take the output of technology and translate that into opportunities and initiatives, is where I think we're going to end up, or at least going to get to at some point. And that means that it's going to be much broader in terms of people being recruited.
Yeah, I feel that it's kind of inevitable, and we're already seeing it now, where you have a lot more people being recruited from outside the function. So the career path isn't as straightforward as, just starting, and this is what my career path was. You start as a buyer, you work your way up to a category manager, you then become a team lead, you ultimately become a head of procurement, and there's that defined path. If those lower levels don't exist, then you're going to bring people in from outside who have market insights and market knowledge, and they know how the companies think, and you're just going to be helping them understand what procurement looks like. And so it's a completely different kind of person and a different recruiting model than we're used to. And I don't know what the alternative is if those lower levels, no longer exist.
I don't. So that's why I said I know more about the issue than I do about the solution. But what I do know as a leader that even my own I don't know if preconception is the right word, but my own natural instincts as to the types of people I have in my team need to be rethought. That my ability to sit there with senior people and for me to be able to have detailed discussions around elements of contracts or data insights or difficulties in global RFPs becomes less and less of importance, and their ability to communicate and understand the needs of their business becomes more and more. Mm-hmm. This really wasn't the case because 10, 15 years ago, when procurement had the sole objective of really saving money and putting more spend under management and putting good SLAs in place, the need of the business was not really something that was understood and nuanced and just assumed to be they want help saving money. And so to think back my perception as to what procurement was like when I was on that flight coming back from India to what, not necessarily what it is today, but what tomorrow can be, is phenomenal. As I said, with that it comes tremendous opportunity and tremendous risk. But if we address the risks in the right manner, then they can be mitigated. And the opportunities, I think, are limited by one's own ambition.
And I really want to, as we start to wrap up, the third point that you mentioned right at the beginning, and you just kind of touched on it there, was that everyone has a significant amount of kind of influence in whether this becomes an opportunity or a risk for them. The decisions that they make will ultimately determine whether this is something to be embraced or feared. So I just wonder if we could wrap up with a couple of actions that you would recommend that listeners can actually take today to position themselves for success in the context of all of these changes.
Okay, so the first one, this applies to all elements of someone's career, which is take ownership for your own career development, career progress. That a good manager will help you get to where you want to go to, but don't rely on them to get there and be passive about it. That take ownership that this is where I need my career to get to at this point in a year, 2 years' time, and these are things I need help with. A good manager will help you get there, but you need to crystallize your thoughts around what that needs to be. But part of those thoughts needs to be an understanding of the skill sets, not necessarily just the roles or promotions, but the skill sets that are going to benefit you most in the future. And they are not necessarily the skill sets you thought you might have needed 5-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so things like people-to-people skills, without that should be opportunities taken, if you have a presentation club, or whether you have the opportunity to lead meetings, or whether you have the opportunity to sit in more detailed negotiations or discussions with suppliers. But those things which require more of instinct and gut feel and reading of the person, that is going to certainly position you in the best area. The second is enhancing your category of business knowledge. Get up from your desk and go talk to people in the business. Understand more about the way the HR department works, the way the marketing department works, or the way that people look at management consultancy or IT, and understanding the impact that has upon a business's ability to be agile and achieve innovation and take advantage of opportunities. Understand really what time to market means in a real sense to the business, rather than just being a KPI we put on. What does that mean? What does that stop us from doing when we don't meet it? What does it mean when we do achieve it? because that type of knowledge and insight enables you to then have peer-to-peer discussions with people in the business, and be considered that you can add value in not necessarily just a commercial way, but also in a non-commercial way.
Yeah. Well, Oliver, there's lots of food for thought here. I just really appreciate you spending some time to share your perspective. I mean, I really love it because it's so aligned with what I think, where I think the future of the profession is going. Is there a future of the profession? That's a whole different question. What is it going to look like? What do we need to be successful, and how do we change our value prop? So many things in there that I really want listeners to take away from the conversation. As I wrap up with our last question, and I always say this is the easy one, is if listeners would like to connect with you, reach out, where's the best place for them to find you?
To probably do it via LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So Oliver Gall, and then connect with me there.
Well, I will pop your LinkedIn profile in our show notes. That's going to be at artofprocurement.com. And then just search for Oliver Gall. So once again, Oliver, I just really appreciate you spending time with us. And thanks for coming onto the show.
Great. Thanks, Phil. You're doing good work. Cheers.
Thank you. Hi there, Art of Procurement listeners. It's Phil here. And I'm excited to share with you the new offer we've been working on. It's called the Catalyst Co-Platform, or TCP. So TCP is a distillation, curation, and contextualization of all the conversations we've had here at Art of Procurement and through our weekly newsletter. We also incorporate the content of others from both inside and outside of our community. And TCP, it's all about taking action. It's about leveling up. It's about enhancing our impact as a community and as individual professionals. The TCP provides a safe space and tools that we can use to generate value for our teams and for ourselves. It brings structure and what we call facilitated accountability to the way that we learn, develop, and validate new ideas. Based on the work we've done in the enterprise space and the feedback that we've received from many in the community, we designed TCP with a bias towards dynamic, actionable content and interactions that require no more than a few minutes of your time every day. It's not about checking boxes, and it's not for everyone. But if you're the kind of professional that sees themselves as a catalyst and prioritizes effectiveness over productivity, then TCP may be for you. We are now taking applications for early access to our flagship TCP program. This early access program will be only available between now and September the 15th, and it's limited to just 50 individuals. For the early access application, or to find out more about our team and enterprise versions, please go to artofprocurement.com/TCP. That's artofprocurement.com/TCP, or click the link in the sidebar of the artofprocurement.com homepage. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.